for me, something like Requiem, and it goes in my mind somewhat with Mass in Blue, which is obviously a very different work, but they're both works that seem to me to be very kind of demonstrative of some of what you bring to the table. So obviously the whole jazz element in Mass in Blue, but there's some sort of jazz folk pop stuff bubbling under the surface of Requiem as well, I think, and also obviously your whole engagement with choral music, the choral music of your contemporaries. So I think the Requiem would be different if people like John Rutter and John Tavener weren't somewhere in your brain.
First memory of working on this, Will, we had met and worked together on a wonderful streetwise opera project that you wrote called Whirlwind, and that had included some conventional guitar, including some acoustic, but also you explored with me some kind of sound worlds that took it out of the conventional guitar sound. So we'd already had a look at what might be possible in terms of slightly unconventional sounds coming from a guitar. That was sort of 2006, and a couple of years later you came to me going, "Hey Tom, can we take this a bit further maybe?" That's my first memory.
For me, the Requiem, I suppose, grew out of an ambition on the part of the Fairhaven Singers, who I'd been conducting, I guess, for about 10 years then, to broaden our activities and get involved in commissioning. So I took over the choir in 1997, and I think you and I had our first discussions about the Requiem in about 2006. Of guitar was interesting, and funnily enough, you and I sort of had the same idea independently at about the same time. I said, it could be for quite small scoring, maybe choir and string quartet, or solo guitar ... and you kind of picked that up and ran with it. different composers have set different parts of the Requiem. And I remember at some point, fairly early in the planning of the piece, you asked me to send you the text. So I think I more or less compiled the maximum it could be, which is like Mozart plus Fauré and bits and pieces.
You had some creative thoughts and sounds and ideas in your head already. I think maybe even some sketches, particularly this idea of getting guitar away from a percussive instrument where you pluck a string, and you get something coming out, into something more, well, we use the term bowed, like a string instrument. Now, with the guitar turned down, just like if I strum, the microphone I'm speaking through will pick it up. You'll hear a very gentle strumming. Very familiar sound. If it was an acoustic guitar, it would come out with a lovely woody tone. Electric doesn't have that. So you plug it in and it will go to an amplifier, which then goes to a speaker. Very simple. That's the old traditional way. And then you'll get something like a sort of very straightforward, familiar, clean guitar sound, what we call clean. If I just switch over to it could be called distorted, dirty, heavy, overdriven, they're all the same terms really. You get a fuzzy, saturated, very familiar sound, which leads into the classic sort of, the lead guitar tones we've all heard. That was quite a mellow one. You could be much brighter and brasher. That's a heavy rock tone, that one. So there we go, distorted and clean, and they're the two basic sounds that I use. There are many permutations in between, of course, if you want. I was always fascinated. As soon as I could get my hands on guitar, on effects pedals, I wanted to explore, to take the guitar into, the sort of bigger dimensions, if you like. I was always really, really sort of wowed when I heard records with a really echoey guitar. Sort of not just sounding in your face and up front, but sort of drifting around and sort of having this incredible sustain or ambience. And singing, that singing tone, I was always fascinated by that. Now if I turn on my echoes, which are, I think, here, I'll just play these to you. That's that's an awful lot of echo. There repeats. Now the reason I've got a lot of echo is because what I'm demonstrating is actually the very beginning of the Requiem. You can have long, short, fast, slow echoes. You can design them to be however you want. If anyone knows the music of U2, those of a certain age, the guitarist in that uses echoes for everything, for absolutely... he set up rhythmic patterns with it. With a delay, you play one note, the echo plays 3 back to you, so that can be very useful. But yes, that's a clean sound with the echo, with a percussive. But then if we start adding this volume swell that I talked about, I've stopped playing and it's still carrying on, but you're not hearing the attack of the note, and that's something rather beautiful. So that's a really nice sort of starting point for getting something a bit smoother. Then we go into distortion. So I'll turn the echoes off again. I'll go to a distorted sound. Pretty gross and sort of, not gross, just, it's what you expect, dirty. But I don't want it, I want it to sing, and I want it to sound smooth and lovely. So I turn the echoes on, turn the volume down, hit a note, open E string. And then we have a foghorn. But if we start going higher registers with that, then we're entering a realm of I don't know, melancholy, beauty, a completely different sort of atmosphere. And that's sort of where we really started, I think, with the Requiem.
With new works, I think the first challenge is always kind of convincing the choir that it's a really good project to be involved with. Now, I'm not saying that there was lots of resistance from the choir, but there is always, when you're taking on a piece that ended up, 50 minutes long or something, there's always a stage to be got through of saying, this is really cool.
Let me just give you a quick taster of the opening. I won't do the whole tone row, but the first note you hear is that low open E. So that's just the first half of that beautiful tone row. As you say, then it gets repeated higher. Now, the guitar, let me turn this off and quickly show you the range of the instrument. We start normally from a low E, and we can go with this guitar right up to a high E, really high E, which is, gosh, 2, 3 above middle C. So that's a pretty big range. But you wanted more, both in both directions, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, this guitar is a 7-string, so it has a low B, which is going down to the kind of the lowest note that bassists sing in a choir, pretty much. So that's a really big range, a low B up to a very high E. But we wanted to extend that even further. So again, I'm very lucky with the technology now. Well, looking at the pedals, there's something here called a whammy, which is a funny name. It's not the only thing that does this. Pitch shifters have been around since the late 70s, actually. So I can now use this whammy device. Let me just get the right setting to take notes. Not only that's the root note. We can now take it up 2 octaves if we want to, and that's what we're doing with this. So up 2 octaves, that note then becomes, which is extraordinarily high, really. Combined with the sustainer, as I'm doing now, and we've got endless sustain on these wonderful high notes. That's without the echo as well.
So many people who come to hear choral music won't have heard much music like your Requiem for choirs, but crucially, they have heard very confrontational and abrasive music in the context of film scores and TV music, for instance. So I think writing a piece like the Requiem is not a problem in terms of confronting an audience in the way that, The Rite of Spring was in 1913 or something. It's not that people, I don't think, are ever going to be kind of shocked and sort of pinned back to their seats in horror by a piece like your Requiem. I mean, if it was like that all the way through, if the whole thing were angry cadenzas from guitar and atonal clusters from the choir, that would be problematic. But of course, the piece isn't like that at all. It's got many very, lyrical, tonal, melodic, expressive moments.
There's another gadget on the guitar. It's a very old one, actually. It goes back to the early days of... Better just turn some things off here. The days of rockabilly in the 1950s, and it's known as a tremolo arm. It should be called a vibrato bar, because it does vibrato, not tremolo. Vibrato is pitch, tremolo is volume. But it's known as a tremolo arm. These misnomers kind of creep in. Now what that does, you can see it here, is very simply change the pitch like that. There. So you can have a gentle vibrato with it, right through to the point where you can slacken the strings on them, so they rattle like this and make pure noise. Combine that with the other things we spoke about, and you have something pretty disturbing. So echoes, distortion, and then using this vibrato bar, this whammy bar as it's known, to detune the strings so they rattle, bring in the volume with the volume button. And that at a high volume in a big building is thunderous and rather cataclysmic. It feels like quite a heavy weight to do that as a musician, because it's not like a concerto where it's like, okay, show off your stuff now. This is a very, very serious, emotional, spiritual point in the piece. Plus, it's a moment to show the guitar in all its sort of raging glory, if you like. You did put some guidelines in right at the beginning, just some pointers which I did follow, and then I kind of went out on my own. But I remember you saying it'd be really nice to have a quiet statement of the Requiem theme. There's a little blues theme that I say blues, it's a blues scale, isn't it? Sort of Dorian mode, I say, more than blues, I guess. But it's a beautiful, it's the sort of the main Requiem theme as opposed to the 12-tone row. And you said, please, could I place that in there? And it's wonderful because there's all this raging and wailing, and in the latest version that I sort of tried to work out for the last performance, I end up on this high E. It's all this C Lydian sort of crazy stuff.
I think it was on the day of the premiere in St John's, Cambridge, and after the rehearsal, you said to me, "Well, the choir just don't believe in this work, do they?" I thought, well, obviously, I was kind of distressed that what we were doing was making you think that. I remember saying, "I don't think that's quite true. They're just a bit frightened at the moment,
I've only done it 3 times myself with an audience, and once recently with Ralph again in Cambridge, it was extraordinary. It was sort of transcendental, most of the experience. However, I was at the time I'm adrenalized and completely caught up as well in, am I hitting the right buttons at the right time? It's a very, very complicated. It's sort of using every aspect of your sort of artistry and technical brain at once. But I'm also aware that there was a chapel full of people who had been led on this journey with you. I felt very supported. And I felt that people were kind of almost slightly hypnotised. No, that's the wrong word, but entranced, I hope, in a good way. Exploring death in all its aspects is a huge thing, and it's something that's how I approach it. Very much feeling that before I even play a note. It's like this isn't just an abstract piece of music. It's experience. It's incredibly personal to all of us. We all lose people, and we will all die. It's so much part of the Requiem, being so much part of our musical culture for hundreds of years as well. Feels more timely than ever. I mean, a Requiem is always timely, but there's something about the, as you say, the uncomfortable nature of the music. It is uncomfortable at times, hugely uncomfortable. But I find it, coming back to it a little older, even more intensely moving. Yes, the music can be challenging, but it's never challenging for long. I mean, I know people who came last time to the concert who'd never heard any choral music. They had a completely different background. We had friends of friends who came. And were utterly in awe of it and blown away and taken on the journey, even though they didn't know the choral tradition necessarily, and they didn't maybe understand 12-note rows or are used to the feeling of atonality.